Well, thank you very much for inviting us to your AGM. We've had a bit of contact with the Kent Field Club over the years on the Sevenoaks Greensand Commons, which we've always appreciated. So I'll give a bit of an introduction to those who don't know the project. It's a partnership project between Kent Wildlife Trust and Sevenoaks District Council. So, for example, we're employed by Kent Wildlife Trust, but hosted at the Sevenoaks District Council offices. We do, of course, work with parish councils and town councils and landowners. So my name's Andy Willmore and I'm the project manager, and Jaanki Hargrave is the people engagement officer working on this project. So I'll give a bit of an introduction to what the Greensand Commons are, a little bit about the heritage, talk a little bit about the process of securing the funding and working up the project, and then go through some recent works and look forward to the next few months when hopefully we can all get out a bit more. So there's sort of three clusters really. There's the Westerham cluster, so that includes Hosey Common, Farley Common and Crockham Hill Common. Seal cluster, which is over to the east of Sevenoaks, and Sevenoaks Common and Sevenoaks Weald Common, which are kind of central to the project areas. There's a mixed sort of bag of ownership and delivery, which makes our project quite interesting. We have to talk to many different people, and many of the sites are special scientific interests or local nature reserves. This map just gives an indication of the physical sort of layout, with the Westerham sites over to the west of Sevenoaks, Sevenoaks Common and Sevenoaks Weald located centrally, and Seal over to the east. I used to work for London Wildlife Trust and pretty much everything was under London Clay. Working in Kent, you realise that geology is really everything, and really sort of influences the habitats and plant communities. So what makes the Greensand Commons very special is the acidic greensand, impoverished sort of soils and very thin acidic soils over the geology. This really influenced how the land was managed over the years, and the sites were very easy to clear, but very hard to farm, so quite open in aspect. These are some of the species that can be found in and around on the commons. We've got anecdotal historical reports of nightjars on Hosey and Crockham Hill Common. We know that after recent works they are found on the Montreal estate to the west, and over on land adjacent to sort of Bitchet and the Seal side. So they're in the area, and if they were to come onto the commons, that would be really fantastic. There's a huge amount of history that very much sort of is interwoven with human interactions. So these are the old mines at Hosey. They are likely to have been mined since about the 12th century, stone being used locally, but also being used, I believe, in Westminster Abbey. Now, obviously, a site of real importance in terms of their bats, and the whole site, Hosey Common, was a triple SI, but when English Naturalists rationalised them, they sort of honed it down just to the bat caves and a bit of a buffer area around them. Again, that human interaction is really important. This section down the, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but down the middle of Hosey Common, these were plots of land literally allotted to the families of troops returning from the Napoleonic Wars. So nowadays a real no man's land, and just a few people who virtually have squatters' rights at the northern end, but just part of the diverse usage of the commons. This is myself. There's a local historian, Bill Curtis, and two ladies, Jean and Jean, who actually remember going up to the commons as young children with their families and working the allotments. So it's really great just to get that history, and something that we want to tease out a bit more as we move through the project. This is what happens if you don't look after your hedges. This is a beech hedge defining the allotments at Hosey, an amazing structure. I'm always drawn to it each and every time I go there. There's also some amazing veteran trees. This is at Sevenoaks Common. There's a beech and a sweet chestnut entwined and an old oak pollard. So again, that's a thread of interest in the project. The commons are also very good in terms of their insect life. There's a lot of standing deadwood, and that's I know particular interest of Simon's. Nightjars, I kind of touched on them earlier. Be really amazing if they were to return to some of the areas of woodland now being worked. This is an aerial photograph just showing almost like a sort of 1940s view, very conveniently taken by German Air Force over Kent, doing an excellent job on aerial photography, and a more recent photo. And you can just see the encroachment that's taken place in the last, about the last sort of few decades. And that's probably the most significant change in the commons has been in the last few years, that lack of management. So a little bit about working up the project. So we were successful in getting a grant to develop the project. The lottery now recognises that it takes a lot of work to actually pull together these big applications. This was a walkabout. We did a tremendous amount, pulled that information out. We did a lot of consultation. We did a historic review, which is downloadable from the Kent Wildlife Trust project pages on the website. It's got a lot of the local sort of history and how that influenced the landscape. We also produced ecological surveys and outline management recommendations. Some of the sites had management plans, but we were keen just to get one set of eyes looking at the commons in one period of time. All of that sort of pulled into the activity plan, which contains a summary of all of that information and was part of the application to the Heritage Lottery Fund. I won't read through that, but that just gives an indication of the process. And this vision, I wish we'd put some more punctuation in there, but in essence, it's about getting people, eliciting the local knowledge of many people that do have an interest in the commons, sharing that and helping to get people to value and manage the sites going forward. In more actual terms, we were successful in securing that funding from the lottery. We had to get lots of other match funding to make the project happen and to give the lottery confidence to go ahead and support our application. We've got a programme of conservation and access works. We're very much working with volunteers. We've got an education programme as a strand running through the project. And as a sort of outcome, we would also very much like to establish some friends of groups to help continue the legacy once the project funding has finished. So that was leading up to the project. We are just over 2 years through the 4-year project. 1 year of that, of course, has been under the coronavirus restrictions and lockdown, which of course has caused us some challenges. This is Bitchett Common over in Seal. And this is we did a lot of consultation work before undertaking some heathland restoration there. This included putting quite a lot of signage up on site about the proposed works. We put it out in local magazines, residents magazines, and we also held walkovers just so people could sort of talk through our proposals and sort of broach any concerns, and we could sort of talk them through with people. So this is what Bitchett Common was like, a lot of birch scrub, a lot of bracken and a fair bit of bramble, and a fairly bold intervention to this is how it is now. So with the funding from Entrust, which is a landfill tax bolted onto the lottery funding, we've cleared about 5.5 hectares of land up there. The area chosen was chosen because English Nature had done some work up there, I think probably in the 80s, and it was probably the most viable area to do some heathland restoration. Unfortunately, that wasn't sustained, whereas now, because the commons have a higher profile within Sevenoaks District Council, they've actually pledged to maintain the cleared areas going forward. So we can actually sustain what we started. notwithstanding the coronavirus, which did interrupt our plans this year. Again, some really sort of open landscape. The contractors did a really good job. They really were just sort of very selective in taking out some of the young birch. Other trees were left. And also what you have there is a rare glimpse of views across to the North Downs. So that was something that came in the consultation, was a lot of people said they missed the views. Many views were sort of becoming crowded out and no longer visible. Again, some more shots. And some young heather coming through. We do have a problem with bracken, but there were 14 positive indicator species, heathland indicator species found this year in 2020 and only 6 in 2019. So, and also the bracken, whilst it is a problem, is less invasive or dominating the landscape than it has done. We do want to get onto some mechanical cuts this year, and we are mindful of, if at all possible, introducing some grazing up there in the future. So yeah, there's some heat maps produced. We've surveyed it for a couple of years, and the darker map at the bottom showing the increasing amount of more positive heathland species found over there. Again, volunteers help with a lot of this work, as did staff and apprentices, but always opportunities to get volunteers engaged. This is over at Farley Common in Westerham. So fantastic bluebell wood, but with a lot of sycamores encroaching. We've had work days with, we're trying to get a Friends Off group set up in that area. And we just had a day with, in the morning, people sort of removing the sycamore saplings. Lunch was very much kindly provided by a local cafe free of charge. And in the afternoon, we just did a bit of a tree walk because there's some quite really interesting trees within that site. We've done a lot of access work. So whilst this might look fine for some people, others might be concerned about safety and sight lines. So we have done some sensitive sort of clearance of the footpaths. This is staff and volunteers after one of the work days. This was at Bitchett Common. We actually removed something like 40 bin bags of old fly-tipped waste, historic waste, as we sort of opened up the footpath there. Part of the project has been to host some apprenticeships. So we had Anna and Gareth working with us. They've just completed an 18-month apprenticeship, and just slightly after the end date of that apprenticeship, they submitted the portfolio for their City and Guilds qualifications. So they've been a great asset to the project. They've also done extensive mapping work recently in terms of looking at the footpaths and where the problems are. So that will give us a pointer for some future works. So over the last 2 years, we've had over 80 task days, and that's included everything from habitat survey work to access works, and we've even had some archaeological walkover surveys. We've had 70 different people involved in volunteering with the project, and the lottery puts a value to that. So those volunteers have actually contributed over £44,000 to date, which is really fantastic. We also have 300 people on our list for email updates, and if anyone's interested, I'll forward the details to Simon and they can be distributed. So be more than keen to have more contact with yourselves. Just lastly, we looked at the aerial photographs earlier, and we've worked with the Darrant Valley Project and Kent County Council, and we've had 7 of the 8 sites have been subject to a LiDAR survey, which I think of as a sort of high quality 3D aerial photography. That has helped us either sort of spot veteran trees, for example. You can look at different layers, so like the surface vegetation layer, and then you can go a bit deeper and see the underlying sort of geology and structures. So if anyone's interested in that, we are training volunteers up in terms of how to read and understand the LiDAR images, raise questions about some of the marks that are seen there, and then they're investigated with a gentleman called Andrew Mayfield, who's a community archaeologist that we're working with Kent County Council. This is some ground truthing over at Crockham Hill. We found like literally what are likely to be old medieval rabbit warren on part of the site, but there's also evidence of like slit trenches that troops were using to train in during the Second World War. So a real rich sort of ecological and social history. And if that's okay, Jaanki, over to yourself.
Fab. Are you all right to flick through the slides?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Fabulous. So I'm going to give you a snapshot of some of the people engagement projects that have been running over the past 2 years of the project. We're going to start with our veteran trees training. So we trained volunteers that recruited them as well, giving them the skills to go off and record veteran trees across the sites. We've also recruited and trained volunteers to do surveying for us. So they've surveyed everything from wildflowers, bees and butterflies. Brilliant. This is just one of the resources that we've used for that monitoring. We held the first of the Greensands, Sevenoaks Greensands Commons project festivals in 2019, and we were unfortunately unable to run one last year due to COVID, but we are looking forward to holding another one this year. We have been out doing lots of different projects. So the picture pre this was us out at a horticultural show, but we've also been working with local schools. Oh, fabulous. Yeah, we've also been working with lots of local schools, trying to get that interest of the places around them. We've also worked with Scouts groups. Sea Scouts was a particular highlight for us. And it's just trying to get people really involved with all of the sites. We've been working with families. Again, there are lots of communities who live near the commons that don't use them at all. So it's just trying to pique that interest, trying to get the whole family involved. And we've been doing that through a different number of events. We've also been doing some forest school sessions. So these are fully funded, where groups can come out either onto the commons or spaces that are accessible to them. Kent Wildlife Trust are leading forest school sessions for them to give them some excellent bushcraft skills. Fab. So I think this is one of our Sea Scouts. We've also been out to Seal Library. We've done lots of drop-in events, but this particular one is of the tea set. So we told them all about the project, and it was a really lovely way to hear about the commons as well. So a big part of our project is about that intergenerational aspect. The commons have been used for many, many years, and that history will be lost if it isn't shared. So we're really looking to do some more intergenerational project work, especially once restrictions are eased. Fab. So again, this just shows how much knowledge there is to be shared. So we're really looking forward to getting some of our schools that we've been working with out to learn some of these skills about identification, as well as just some of the heritage around the sites.
Thank you, Jaanki. So I won't read through all of this, but this summarises the project. So we have been able to move forward on some conservation work, some access work and community engagement work, even during the period of lockdown. So for example, during lockdown, we produced a lot of like activity packs that could be sent out to various schools, West Kent Mind and others, for example. So quite a diverse audience. And as we now sort of move forward to hopefully being able to work again on site, we look forward to that progressing. So over the next few months, some of the things we want to do are get on top of the bracken at Bitchit. We want to engage with new community groups and new volunteers. There's some great opportunities for that, even if we might have to limit numbers to start with. We've got some very good protocols in place for working during the periods when we were allowed out with volunteers during the coronavirus, and we will we will replicate those during this period going forward when we've got a bit more flexibility. We want to do some podcast sessions, so perhaps looking at the geology of the commons, the old routeways on the commons, so some very ancient routeways, the ecology, various aspects of the ecology of the commons, etc. And again, we're looking forward to taking forest school bookings for this year. As we touched on, we're very keen to do some intergenerational work, really sort of capturing those stories, the social history of the commons from local people. And we want to do some further ground truthing, so looking at the sites, being curious about what some of those varieties in the landform are. And just sort of taking us back to the Kent Field Club, Mario and I think Bob and some others on a visit to Seal Chart. So this is something that we'd like to pick up with yourselves again. Very fond memories of that day. Over 76 species of fungi found, including this specimen, which is only the second or third time it's been found in Britain and a first for Kent. So really great to have your eyes and expertise on the commons, and we'd be very keen to host those going forward. So that's it from us. Really appreciate us having a slot on at your AGM. I don't know if there's any questions.